In this video, I'm going to be showing you the 6 chess endgames that you must know in order to reach 1200 rating in chess. If you find this video to be useful, then please leave a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more helpful videos that will help you raise your chess rating and also allow you to master the game of chess in no time. The first thing that we're going to need to look at before we start looking at the top 6 chess endgames that every 1200 player needs to know, we need to look at what is an endgame. And put simply, a chess endgame is where you have very few pieces on the board and the game is close to its conclusion, whether that be a draw, a stalemate, or a resignation or checkmate. Those are all different ways of the game ending. The second thing that we need to look at before learning about these chess endgames is, why is it important to learn chess endgames? Well, one reason that you can be learning chess endgames is to build your confidence going into the end of the game. The idea is that if you have a certain endgame that you are very familiar with and you can always execute, you can lead the game towards that position, knowing that that will guarantee you a win. Another reason that chess endgames are important to learn is because knowing these endgames will result in more wins, and more wins will result in a higher chess rating. Another reason to study chess endgames is the fact that many players up to 1200 rating in chess have not studied any of these endgames, hence why I'm making this video. And if you know the endgame and they don't, there is a very high chance that they are going to blunder away an easy win. All you have to do is interfere with the plans to checkmate you. The fourth reason to study chess endgames is that you will be able to convert many more positions into a win. Literally hundreds of games you will be able to convert into a win simply by knowing basic endgames. The fifth reason to study chess endgames is that it will begin to teach you the true value of pieces. If you know how valuable that certain piece is going to be in the endgame, such as a rook or a queen, that helps you understand why you should save that piece earlier in the game and also why you should not trade it for certain other pieces. Because once you come to the endgame, you're going to need that in order to win the game. The next reason to study chess endgames is that it will teach you to calculate far deeper in many positions. In the endgame, you have many open squares, and you're going to need to calculate which moves are going to result in a better position for you. And with so many different options, there are endless possibilities of moves to be made. So this will teach you to calculate far deeper in your regular positions. And now we are ready to start the 6 chess endgames that you must know to reach 1200 rating. The first one that we are going to look at is the king versus king and queen endgame. This is a very basic endgame which is very important to learn. The queen is clearly showing that white is winning in this position. So the trick to winning this is to close the distance between your king and your opponent's king. So since it is white's turn to move, we are going to move the king close to the black king. Notice how this queen is covering this entire file here, and the king is covering these 2 squares. So the black king hardly has any options. So black is going to retreat. Now we notice that the white king is covering these squares. The kings are very close to each other, enabling that. So we are going to move our queen to f6, checking the king and pushing him further back. So we'll move black king to d7. We are going to again close the distance with our king. Black king is going to retreat, and we will start closing the box by checking again. Black king moves up here, check, limiting the black king's movement because he is now trapped in this box. So we'll move the black king here. White king moves in. And notice how in this position we are starting to corner the black king. The way to win this game is the way to win this chess endgame is to either push the opponent's king to one of the sides of the boards or to the corner of the board. And in this case, we are pushing him to the corner. Black's turn. The only legal moves are a6 and a8. we'll say that our opponent is going to go to a6. So here it is white to move. We have to be very careful here because in this sort of an endgame, if you are just blindly moving your king closer to your opponent's king, you are very likely to stalemate your opponent. If you want me to make a video on all the types of draws in chess, leave a comment down below and let me know about that. So here we're going to move our queen to b4, just to give black some room to breathe. Only legal move is in fact a7. King moving in for checkmate on c6. Black has two legal moves, both lead to mate in 1. a6 is met with queen b6 checkmate. Or king to a8 also results in checkmate with queen to b7. Notice how we're using the white king to support the white queen as she is checkmating the black king. So this is the very first of the 6 chess endgames you need to know to reach 1200. The second chess endgame that you need to know is the king plus rook and rook versus a lone king. This is a very common chess endgame for players all the way up to 1200, and I have seen countless times white is winning or black is winning, and they have 2 rooks, but the player does not know how to checkmate with these 2 pieces. So I'm going to clearly show you how to do it. In this situation, what we want to do is we want to take advantage of the fact that these rooks cover an entire row or file on the chessboard. And we're going to use this to slowly block in the king and force him to any side of the board. So the very first step here is to choose a side of the board that you would like to checkmate your opponent onto. And I recommend choose the side that your opponent's king is the closest to. If you choose one that's farther away, it will still work, but it's going to take more time. And we're going to assume that you are in a time crunch and you need to checkmate as fast as possible. So we notice that the black king is quite close to the 8th file. So what we're going to do is we are going to start blocking in the king. So first move, we're going to play rook c4. This is going to cut off the king from all of these squares. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut off this 5th row from the opponent's king. So we'll play rook to c5. What this does is it blockades this entire row, which is exactly what we want. The black king can't move towards our rook because he would be in check by our other rook. So he's going to move to the side. Now we are going to eliminate a 2nd row, the 6th row. This rook here is now cutting off this row, and this rook is cutting off this row, leaving the black king with nowhere to go except for back. We're going to say that he's going to try to give us some problems, and he's going to attack our rook. The simplest way to handle this is just to move the rook as far away while still maintaining this row of control. So black is continuing to try to cause us trouble, trying to get close to these rooks so that checkmate is not possible. Yet we are going to do the same exact move, and we're going to go across the board to the other side with the rook. Now the king is still boxed in, and he's very far away from the attacking rooks. King c7. We are now going to cut off the 7th row with this move, rook h7. It cuts off the 7th rank and the 6th rank. King must move here, which prevents checkmate in 1 by prevents checkmate in 1 by rook a8. So all we have to do, move the rook as far away from the king as possible and prepare to cut off the final row from the king, resulting in checkmate. King c8 results with rook to g8, checkmate. These 2 rooks have worked together to eliminate all of the rows that the black king can move to. Now there is no escape for the black king, and this is checkmate. This type of a checkmate can work on any side of the board. Just make sure to keep eliminating rows of your opponent, eliminate all the rows that he can move to, and make sure to move your rooks to a far side of the board so that your opponent's king cannot get close. The third chess endgame that you are going to need to know to reach 1200 in chess is the pawn and king endgame versus a lone king. So the idea in this endgame is to promote our pawn. We want to clear the way all the way to the final rank with our king. So what we need to do is we need to get our king in front of our pawn. If we allow black to get his king in front of our pawn, then the game is going to be a draw. Assuming that your opponent plays the correct moves, it's always going to be a draw because there's no way to dislodge the opponent's king from the promoted square, and there's no way to get your pawn in and promote it. So the first move we're going to play is King F4. We're trying to clear the way here. Black is moving to E6, trying to cut off this attack, and we're going to go King G5. Here it is very important that you play the correct move. When I first filmed this video, I actually played the wrong move by mistake, and that would be Pawn F4. This allows the black king to get in front of us, and there's no way to dislodge this king. So we need to push the king to G6. Ultimately, we want to get our king here on G7 so that we are guarding the promoting square. So black moves back, we'll move back. Black advances, we push the pawn, King F7. Now, the important move to play, oh man, I got it wrong again. I instructed people that moving the pawn, once the king was here on G5 and moving the pawn forward, that was the draw. It's actually not. That's actually the right move to play. The third chess endgame that you must know in order to reach 1200 rating in chess is the king and pawn versus a lone king endgame. In this endgame, the idea is to promote our pawn, and we need to grant a clear passage with our king. So the first move we're going to play is King F4. We need to make sure that our king is always in front of our pawn. If the pawn gets in front of the king, our opponent can walk in front of it and block the pawn from promoting. And this is going to result in a draw through stalemate, through fold repetition, or the 50-move rule. So black plays E6, and we're going to play G5. We want to allow this pawn to promote. So we're going to see King F7. We'll push our pawn. King E6. Black king is trying to interfere with our promoting. However, now we're going to start pushing again. This pawn is never dropped so long as it's one square away from the king, so we're fine here. Black can't move here, lest being checked by the pawn, so he's going to go E7. So now we're going to play F5, and black is going to get into the promotion square, trying to cut off our pawn. So what we need to do is we need to dislodge him, and the way to do this is simply play King F6. This forces the black king to move either to E8 or G8. And once he does that, we will move to the opposite dark square, and the game is essentially won. So black moves to E8, and what we do is we now cover the promoted square so the black king can no longer stop the promotion. Now the black king is futilely just kind of waiting around. There's nothing he can do here. Check again. King begins to run away, and here we're going to promote. And now this turns into our very first endgame we talked about in this video, king plus queen, checkmating a lone king. And from here, you should have a pretty easy win. The fourth chess endgame that you need to know in order to reach 1200 chess is the queen, rook, and king versus a lone king endgame. So in this chess endgame, we are going to use the queen just like we would a rook. And with this method, you can pre-move the entire checkmate. And it is the most amazing feeling, especially when you do it online. I have done this endgame several times online, and I pre-move the entire thing because there's nothing the black king can do about it, and it's just an easy win. So in this endgame, we again want to push the opponent's king up against a wall and checkmate him just like we did with the ladder checkmate, which is formerly what the rook and rook endgame is called, where you're using them like a ladder to slowly checkmate your opponent. So what you want to do here is first move the queen behind the rook. So I've already chosen that I want to push this black king up against this wall and checkmate him. So what I'm doing is I'm setting up a checkmate just like this. And the reason why I say you can pre-move this entire checkmate is because there is no way for black's king to do anything about this rook. He can get right up to your rook, and the queen is always going to guard your rook. So there's nothing that he can do. So here we are. We just played queen h2, king e5, trying to get closer to us. And we're just going to start rolling this king up against a wall. So now both of these rows are covered by our queen and our rook. And that is what is important here. Our opponent is going to move to f5, and we'll play rook g5 check. Queen covers this row, and the rook covers this row. The only move is king back to f6, or he could go to e6. It doesn't matter what he does because it's checkmate here. So next move, queen h6. Queen h6 covers this row, defends the rook, and the rook is covering this row. King has to move back. Then the rook moves to g7, checking the king again. It is still defended by the queen, moving the king back another square, and the final move, queen h8, checkmate. There is nothing that your opponent can do about this checkmate so long as you keep the queen and the rook together and you leave the queen behind the king. I'm sure you could also do it the other way with the queen in the front, but when you do it, you just have to be careful because the rook doesn't defend the queen. So you might play this exact same checkmate scenario, but here the white queen is undefended. Black king can simply take it, and now you're going to have to move into the king and rook endgame, which just so happens to be the 5th chess endgame that you need to know in order to reach 1200 in chess. So here I've set up the king and the rook endgame versus a lone king. This is a much easier position to look at, but the principles are the same no matter where the placement of the pieces are on the board. Make sure in your mind to choose one side of the board to checkmate your opponent to. If you were trying this checkmate and you switch between different sides of the board to checkmate, it's going to make your eventual win a lot more complicated than it needs to be, and you might accidentally draw through 50-move repetition, 3-move repetition, or even stalemate. So just to avoid that, choose one side of the board to checkmate your opponent to and focus on just getting that king to be checkmated there. So here it is white to move, so I'm going to move the rook to a side of the board. It doesn't really matter which side. I just want to get the rook as far away from this king as possible. Our opponent moves here. Now, what we want to happen is we want, on our turn, to move in front of our opponent's king. This way, we can move our rook here, check the opponent's king, and he cannot go to any of these 3 squares because it's covered by our king. And this rook covers this row, forcing the king back. And we're going to repeat this over and over and over again until eventually we have this position and it's our turn to deliver checkmate here. The king cannot escape anywhere, and this row is covered. So here is our position. Black just moved. We are going to move right here. This kills a move. So now, no matter where this black king goes, it's going to work into our plan. If he moves here, we check him, and he has to move back to one of these 3 squares. If he moves here, then we simply move our king 1 knight's hop away from the opponent's king. So we're going to assume our opponent does that. He plays b5. We will play king c3. And now he goes back in front of our king. Now there's nothing he can do here to avoid a check, such as this. He's checked. He cannot move any of these squares, so he has to retreat back. And he decides to attack our rook, so we'll move it far away. King to c6. King d4, maintaining this knight's hop away from our opponent. Now he's going to run this way. We'll keep the knight's hop. He runs again, knight's hop, and now it's his turn. He could either go back and help us out, or he can go here. This results in check. The king cannot move to any of these three squares, and oops, and this row is covered. So our opponent is forced back, and we're simply going to repeat this pattern. No matter where your opponent moves, make sure that you are always one knight's hop away from your opponent. Now that he's reached our rook, we move it all the way to the other side, maintaining the same row, so the king cannot escape and get further away from us. Now, we move here. Oh wait, it's his turn, sorry. He moves king f7. So now it appears that we have a problem. It's our turn, and we don't want to be the person to move here. If we do, our opponent is able to escape, and no matter where we go, our opponent is always able to escape. If we try to check him, he starts to escape by moving this way. So here what we're going to do is something called a waiting move. We're going to move the rook one square. This means it forces our opponent to move. He moves here, and we check him, and he's forced back. If he moves here, then all we do is we maintain our one knight's hop away until it is his turn, and then he has to move in front of our king. Next, we check him, and he has to move back. Then we'll maintain our knight's hop, and we will repeat this pattern, moving our rook away once he's under attack, and then a waiting move so that our opponent's king has to go here or to here. This would be checkmate, so it was a terrible move. He's going to go c8, king d6, b8, c6, a8, b6, and now our opponent has only one legal move, king to b8, which results with checkmate, rook to g8. This covers the entire back row, and the king cannot escape anywhere due to this king being right there. So this is the 5th chess endgame that you need to know in order to reach a 1200 rating. So in the 6th endgame that you must know, it is a passed pawn endgame. So we're going to take this pawn on f4. Now we have a passed pawn, which essentially means a pawn is unrestricted by other pawns and can easily promote. So here black is going to try to cut off our pawn. What we're going to do is we're also going to threaten this pawn. In this endgame, it is not important to save both pawns, but rather you must save one pawn. So he moves in to kill this pawn, we move in to get his pawn. He takes our passed pawn, and we simply make another passed pawn. Now this pawn is going to promote no matter what black does. The king is going to try to stop it, and we are going to cut off our opponent's king entirely from this row. King moves here. We move one square further. King moves back, and we just start pushing this pawn. There is nothing that black can do here, as when black tries moving in, all we do is we move here, and it's black's turn, and they simply have to move here. King d7, and now all we have to do is king a7, covering the promoted square, and now our pawn is going to promote. Note here the black king cannot move to the promoted square. It is covered by the king, and he's under check. So king c7, pawn promotes to queen, check, and then from here it is another simple queen and king versus a lone king chess endgame. I really hope that these 6 basic chess endgames will help you reach new highs in your chess rating. Be sure to drill these practice endgames and practice them over and over and over again. Don't be afraid to replay this video if you want to rewatch how I explain to complete these checkmates, so that the next time you find these endgames in your chess matches, you will be sure to convert it to a win. Now, while these 6 endgames are very important to learn and will help you significantly to reach new highs in your chess rating, it is also very, very important to practice basic chess openings and also to practice chess tactics. If you guys want me to make a video on either of those 2 topics, then please leave a comment down in the comment section of this video to let me know. Some basic chess openings I would recommend are the King's Pawn, the 4 Knights opening, the Queen's Pawn opening, and the Queen's Gambit. Those are all some very basic and simple to learn chess endgames that will significantly help you in your chess games. Want me to make a chess video answering your question? Leave a comment down below and I will be sure to read every single comment on this video within the first hour of posting. I do my best to reply to every single comment I receive on any of my videos across my YouTube channel, so don't be afraid to leave me a comment. I'll get back to you within 48 hours. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos that will help you raise your rating and master chess in no time.